We love you. Thank you very much. And you see, there's one thing about domestic violence. It has nothing to do with race, class, gender, or sex. Everyone is affected by domestic violence. Our next speaker, we're excited. This is a new girlfriend. Yep, I got a new girlfriend, so you're going to be seeing her some more. We're excited about Dr. Mitchell. She is a proud pastor of the St. Matthew's Chapter AME Church in Boonville, Missouri, and is active in both communities. She served as vice president of the Broom Slick Ministerial Alliance. She's been on multiple boards and community contributions. She currently holds the position as administrative secretary to presiding Elder Roger D. Jackson in the Midwest South District and is a worship leader of the Midwest Conference Women in Ministry. We are excited about our new girlfriend. And I'm going to tell you now, once I embrace you, you going to work.
Oh, thank you, Miss Loretta. She makes me sound so accomplished, and I'm a baby in the ministry. So, but I have a quick story to tell you. On August 1st, 1968, a couple got married, and they became pregnant on their first night. 6 months down the line, he threw her down the stairs with the intention of killing her and killing the baby. She was 6 months pregnant. 52 years ago, that was me in my mother's stomach. 7 years later, they had 3 children, and she decided to finally leave. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence states that 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. I address children because I am a product of and a survivor of intimate partner domestic violence through my parents. And it was always a wonder to me as a child how my mother could stay with someone who was so abusive. Those 7 years saw my mother beat up, broken ribs, blackened eyes, hair pulled out. And every time she left, she still went back to my father. And it is stated that a woman will attempt to leave 7 times before they actually finally leave. Well, on my 7th birthday, my mother decided to get a divorce from my father and stay divorced from my father. So what does that mean for the children that are growing up in these environments? Well, the long-term effects of this could be physical, mental, and mental health issues. And they have a greater risk of being violent in their relationships. So as I look back over my 52 years of life and wondered how that manifested in me, I'm good, saved, sanctified, and holy, but I wasn't always good, saved, sanctified, and holy, right? I noticed the pattern that as I got older, I became more violent, more outspoken. My relationships did not last long. I had a tendency to pick the same kind of man that my mother had chosen to be our father. I was in and out of trouble a lot. I drank a lot. And I had a hard problem defining my emotions and things of that nature. But I also grew up in an era where you didn't talk about domestic violence. It was what it was. We have a thing in the Black community, you don't let anybody know what's going on in this house. And that was my mother's strictest instructions before we went out to school. So I had to carry all of this violence to my classroom. I couldn't tell anyone. I was hurting and couldn't tell anyone. And now that I am 52 years old, I only got healed maybe 15 years ago by attending therapy and going to work out some stuff in my head about my own place and where I was emotionally and why I did the things that I did. And so I'm grateful for the mental health services I did receive that I sought out on my own. However, as a working paraprofessional now, and I'm working with the Title I school, I am seeing that some of these emotional and mental issues are affecting our children. The pandemic has not been kind to our children, and they're coming to school with all of these issues, with all of these emotions that they cannot process. They're not mature enough to process, and they're looking for a safe space, some space that I wish I had when I was going to school, to know that you're going to school after hearing your parents argue, fuss, fight, or whatever, and come home to the same thing. And it was always a constant cycle of violence in our household. And so what I'm doing today is advocating on the behalf of children that will grow up one day to be 52 years old, to offer them and try to procure more services for them, for their mental health and their well-being. We like to say kids don't know what they're talking about, but we do, and I did, and I know that I had to grow up with this whole emotional baggage over my head before I decided to go get well. Well, I want to advocate on getting them well before they get there. And so that means we have to look at all of the things that come with these children, all the intersectionalities, the race, the poverty, the gender, whatever they are going through, to keep them from getting access to services. Now, my school is lucky. We do have in-house counselors, but they're only there during the school period. How do we get our children out in order to give them the service that they so sorely need? At our church, as the pastor of our church, there's always an open door policy to my office, and we also partner with therapists, child psychologists, and marriage therapists in the next big city over, Columbia, because I tell people I have not gotten my mental health degree yet, so I'm not qualified to do things. And I think sometimes clergy does a disservice when they're not qualified, nor trained, nor certified to address the issues that a lot of people are going through. And so I am fortunate that I have a lot of great friends in Columbia, Missouri, that are certified, that are trained, that have degrees, and are well equipped to deal with the issues at hand. So at our church, when I know I can't deal with it, I send them and I refer them to someone else that I know can. And so my message today, short but sweet: clergy, if we are not qualified to do it, don't do it. We can do more damage than we can do good in helping someone through their healing process. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity. Children are my passion. I love them. They are something else, and they'll tell you things, and they are so much more resilient than we give them credit for. But I think if we can get them healed earlier than much later. You know, I was in my 40s when I decided to go get healed. Between age of 7 and 40, I had done a lot of damage to myself, just manifesting the violence that was shown in front of my face as a child. And so I'm looking to try to get these kids a lot younger in order to make sure that they grow up healthy and better, and knowing that they can tell and not have any retribution because of it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Powerful message, and that's real. We got to get the babies, because they're hurting and that stuff is inside of them, and they're growing up to be what? Same thing what they saw. This is a really critical conversation, and we're going to go deeper into that as we move forward. Our next speaker, very dear friend of mine, boy, does she have a story. Woo, Jesus, keep me near the cross. Reverend Rosie Freeman, a very dear friend of mine that has done great work in the Richmond Bay area of California, including a founder of one of the churches there in Richmond. She's done work in the prison ministry, helping the transitioning of the incarcerated to have employment, multiple things, but is one that is more critical is her story. Reverend Rosie, could you come on in, please? Praise God. So there she is. We got to ask her to unmute and come on in. So as she unmutes, the next thing we're going to do once we conclude each panelist.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, dear. Yes, please go forward.
Yes. Good morning. Over here in California, it's 10:10. So I'm just saying good morning, good day to everyone. Yeah, my story with domestic violence started when I was a child, and there was a lot of violence in my home where I grew up. I actually was an abandoned child And then finally, I moved to California when I was 5 years old, and all of the violence in the home continued. Then 1998, I got married. I married a person that was probably more like a psychopath, a narcissistic individual. On my honeymoon night, there was violence. I couldn't be comfortable in my own home. I would barricade myself into the room whenever he got angry. I was, at that time, we became pastors, and he was the pastor of the church. And because I had been married so many times, like 3 times, I didn't want to tell the church that I was being abused. So I lived in abuse for 17 years. I tried to keep myself safe and keep myself from being harmed. One of the things I remember is putting up a Christmas tree and trying to make our home festive for the holidays. And I had been gone all day. And when I was putting up the Christmas tree, he hit me in my head from behind, and my ear began to bleed. And so those were like some really traumatic times. And on our honeymoon night, I remember before I could even get my wedding dress off, I was already in a pool of blood in my room. And so I was just terrified the whole time. But I think it's important for churches to, like our previous sister said, is to be able to refer people when they're in domestic violence situations and allow people to be transparent, because I lived in that violence for 17 years. And, you know, I did work and do a lot of things despite the violence. I was able to function outside of the home and go to work. I started the Second Opportunity Christian Center. I helped over thousands of people who were on drugs. I did prison ministry in San Quentin, Santa Rita. Also, I started a transitional housing. I went to school at San Diego Christian College, and I did over hundreds of units for my internship and to help addicts, because I was a previous user as well. And so I was also suicidal. I just had a lot of things going on, and I was trying to help everybody instead of trying to put my mask on first. And I heard a lady tell me once, she said, put your own mask on first. If the plane's going down, put your mask on first. But I didn't really understand what that meant. And so, you know, later on in life, I began to understand that I need to take care of myself first and then help other people. But I was in church the whole time, and nobody ever really reached out to me. Nobody could see anything that was going on with me. My leaders, my mentors, they couldn't really see what was going on with me. As long as I was saying Jesus and reading the Bible and coming to prayer meetings and giving my tithes and offerings, nobody really could address the psychological issues that I was going through at the time. So I lived in that situation for 17 years, and finally he decided to leave me. But I was able to stay safe. So my thing is, now I understand, as the sister said, or the pastor that said that, our speaker before, she said that we have to learn how to refer people if you're not trained in domestic violence. So I do thank God for this group, and I'll be able to go through Dr. Loretta and refer people whatever is necessary. But I lived a life of torment for 17 years, and I'm really glad to be free now. I'm studying. I have my BA in human development. I've been to law school. Just trying to do things to make myself a better person. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rosie, for that powerful testimony. Powerful testimony. That's deep. And I sent everyone a copy of my book because I wanted you to understand that it was Negro, which was my husband at the time, brought to my attention that my trauma was not only with him in domestic violence, but it was a childhood trauma that was so embedded in me. A lot of that stuff that was going on in my life, from intimate molestation to rape, humiliation, verbal abuse, it just stayed in the back of my mind. It just stayed in the back of my mind. And so one of the things I want us to talk about now, because we've all had an opportunity to speak, it's time to unmic and let's get into it. Why do you think in that case, and I'll use me as an example, that childhood trauma stayed so embedded that when you get older, for some reason you perpetuate the same cycle? How is it that the cycle continues? And I know we don't have the capacity, may not have the capacity of having the degrees to speak upon it, but let's speak about it from a personal perspective. What is it that causes us to stay in that perpetual sameness?
I know for me,
Mm-hmm.
as a child experiencing domestic violence almost every day of her life, my thing was, and this was through therapy, I did not want to be like my mother. And not being like my mother, I became like my father. And no one ever addressed that this was wrong, because historically in Black families, you know, we have a historical distrust of doctors, therapists, and not without reason. You know, we have some reason to be distrustful of the medical and therapist community. No one ever thought, okay, do my kids need help? Because I remember an incident when my father was jumping on my mother. We had lost our home. That's another thing. Economics is another thing. You know, coming from a two-parent home, we had lost our home because my mother couldn't go to work because she was bruised all up and everything. And we moved from a nice home to the projects. And I'll never forget the projects because all they had were concrete walls, and I hated that place. And I hated my father for making us move into this place. And so he jumped on my mother about something she wasn't cooking right. And in the process of jumping on her, all three of us jumped on my father, on his back, because we were trying to protect her, but we really wanted to do damage to my father. And I hit him with a pan. And so as I grew older, my response was always to fight back. Don't let them get you before they get, before you get them. And no one ever said that that's wrong too. You can't continue to do that. And it was only going through therapy and trying to figure out my path and what I was supposed to be doing and why I kept doing these self-destructive behaviors, did I find out that in trying not to become like my mom, I became like my father. And that was like, whoa, okay. Because Bridget, you do have a lot of mouth and you will hit first, because I always had that mentality to someone's going to die and it's not going to be to me today, So I think because we don't address the children, we don't really see the pain that children are going through. And we fail sometimes as parents to say, okay, I see you hurting, but they're so busy nursing their own hurts and their own wounds that they don't have time sometimes to look at us and say, I know this is hurtful. Do you need to go get help?
All right. So let me ask you this in reference to the faith-based construct. What is it about the faith community that it does not want to address domestic violence? Reverend Bridget, you put in something which I heard myself. Well, just pray about it. Yeah, but I'm getting my behind kicked.
That part.
Yeah.
That part. Yeah. We're good about that.
Yeah.
Oh, just pray about it, and I'm like, wait a minute, God wants me to sit here and continue to do this? I don't think that's the kind of God I serve. And we do a disservice when we send people back into their homes telling them to pray about it. Like there's some kind of big old manifestation that all of a sudden it's going to stop tomorrow. And they're going back into the same situation and they don't have the tools to know how to lead. And so, like my sister that spoke after me, she was in it for 17 years. you know, and both of them were clergy, you know, and so we tend to turn a blind eye because we don't want to think about domestic violence. We don't want to hear that word. We want to say, go home and make your marriage work because God honors marriage. But God does not honor you whooping my butt, you know, and that's the thing we fail to tell some of these people. So when we get into that really gray area of trying to counsel people, we have to be very, very careful of how we're coming across to these people, because we could be sending them into a very dangerous situation.
Oh, yes. I would like to interject something there. Is that okay, Dr. Loretta?
Sure, you go forth.
Okay. I agree with my sister. I'll go all the way back to thinking about, you know, people saying, yeah, go back to the situation because God honors the marriage and he doesn't want you to depart from the individual, what God put together, let no man put asunder. That's one of the things they say mostly. And I think that what they don't understand, yeah, you got a lot of Jesus. You already are spirit. You have the Spirit of God. You are renewed in your spirit, but what they're lacking to see is that soulish realm, the emotional realm that's been damaged, that may have caused some personality disorder or something else is going on with that individual because of the trauma that they faced as a child. So they're not addressing the emotional realm of the individual, the psychological part. And so they kind of overlook so many different things that could be going on, like borderline, borderline personality disorder, psychopathic behavior, all these different things. I actually counseled a lady, and we were friends. So it was just like on a one-on-one. She had been had a lot of anger from her childhood because she would be locked in the closet by her parents. And then, so anyway, make a long story short, I told her after I listened to her story, I felt her pain. I told her to, you know, do what her heart says to do, if that was to leave this individual. She went back to her church and they told her to stay in the marriage. She wound up killing the person. She wound up killing her husband.
Wow.
So, I wanted to just verify what the Reverend was saying prior to my testimony here.
Wonderful. Now, John, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I found not only when I was counseling LGBTQ parishioners, but certainly straight parishioners, there was a significant number of people, both male and female, who, because they had such a poor self-image, that somehow they convinced themselves to think they deserve this type of intimate partner abuse. I just don't feel good about myself. I'm not the best person. I deserve this. So I have no right to complain. I have no right for better treatment. And I think we as counselors and advisors, and some of you have said this already, really have to step forward and counsel people. No, you do not have to put up with this. And no, you are not a bad person. And there's absolutely no reason, divine or human, of why you should be abused in that manner. But I found that certainly quite prevalent.
Wow.
I like to say that is so true, John, and especially it just brought to my mind when we talk about the church response. Yeah, keep in mind, historically, women are on the rise in ministry and leadership in the church today, but that has not always been so. We have to kind of trace it back to the mindset in this country about divorce, and that a woman is supposed to take care of her husband. And so if she's being abused, it's because she's not doing her job correctly. We always have to keep that in mind. That mindset has not gone away. Specifically, I have found in the church, for example, here in my community, woman is married to a police officer who made sure. And she was an alcoholic, and he was abusive to her, and she was ready to leave him. But when he became the sheriff of the town, then the community, the church community, her church community, was advocating, no, you cannot leave him because that would hurt his career. So she still in this situation because of the career. Going to what Reverend Mitchell is saying, what impact did it have on the children? And we find the impact on the children is because it left the children with a bad taste for the union between a man and a woman. So the daughter has gone into the LBGT community. The son actually became very violent and it became a police officer and was dismissed from the force because of violence. And so the wife is still in the situation in a loveless relationship because the church said so. So when we had to go back to that, going to what Reverend Mitchell, how it impacts the entire community. And I've always thought about it when going to our sister in the Bay Area. I come from a family, I didn't experience domestic violence in my home, but I experienced violence from my mother, who was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. So I do understand, Reverend Mitchell, the anger, the resentment that I walked around for years, just an angry person, and what that did for me and how it impacted my ability to go into relationships, my ability to be intimate. And so I've always been an advocate as well, that children, which is childhood trauma. And I'm glad that the one positive that come out of COVID-19 is that it put a highlight on childhood trauma. The psychological communities is really putting emphasis on there because children are sheltering in place with the abuser. And I think a lot of times for us to get healed is to understand the traumas that we went through. And I think that's where we need to train the church to understand specifically that as pastors and ministers, they come to us for spiritual understanding. But what does the Bible say? Like John listed a lot of scriptures there, for that. But we have to understand that we have to partner with those professionals to help them with professional help. And that's one of the great things, I thank God, that I had the opportunity to be trained professionally as a minister to work in partnership with the military, which is called Fleet and Family Services, as therapists are to recognize when I need to walk them across the street and I need to walk them to get that professional help. But I just want to share that piece right there.
Wonderful. Enjoy.
Yes, and I would say there are aspects of what everyone has said that I identify with, and then coming from the Jewish community that are different as well. It's quite interesting. It's really so varied within the Jewish community. Perhaps it is this way within the Christian community at large, but as a Reformed Jew, as a liberal Jew, and Reform really is, we don't think of ourselves as less spiritual, but we are less ritualistic, let's put it that way, is probably a really accurate way to put it. Conservative Jews somewhere in the beginning and in the middle rather, and Orthodox Jews on another spectrum. But even within Orthodoxy, there are levels, many levels, and the levels really define how the response is going to be. So within the Reform and conservative communities, I can't think of a situation where someone would be told you should pray more. But coming forward would be really hard because, let's face it, keeping up appearances, being part of a family that doesn't look happy, doesn't look like it's meaning, particularly in the Jewish community, I would say, I don't know, maybe this is true everywhere, but looking good and looking like you're happy and looking like you've got it all, all your ducks in a row, I think is really part of, there is an appearance thing going on that really is part of the Jewish community as a whole. The Orthodox community in its varying levels, from modern Orthodox, which looks like everybody else on the street, but is keeping more a very traditional laws, and other Chabad with the long black coats, or various other, and there are many of them, communities with very strict stipulations, living in very tight-knit communities where everyone else is like them, because they can all keep the same rituals and traditions and look together. Within that community, stepping forward and admitting, I want a divorce is seen as an evil. Mm-hmm. And not only an evil, but it's in the hands of the man in some of those communities. A woman doesn't even have a voice or a choice for that. So within those communities, the woman must receive a get, which is the name of the document from her husband that allows her to divorce him. And if he doesn't supply it, she can't get divorced. In the religious community, now in the civil community, obviously, you can go to any court, get a divorce, just like that. But those individuals living within a religious world will be expunged from it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's like Quakers, maybe it's like Mormon, I don't know. Maybe it's, these kinds of very deeply connected communities. Being part of the community religiously is one's entire life. Stepping out of it. And I knew someone deeply, a friend I grew up with, who was of a modern Orthodox household, meaning they kept all the laws, they kept kosher, they kept Shabbat, Sabbath, they were very pious, but they looked like everyone else on the street, except the men had a head covering. But she married into a deeply religious Orthodox world, and the man she married was the son of the rabbi. It was a great honor. Every woman wants to marry the son of the rabbi in that community. This is a world I don't know, but it exists. He was a cruel man, and he beat her. She had children with him. He beat her. She wouldn't leave. Finally, when she made the decision, gathered the strength to leave, she went to the rabbis, and they said, "You must get a get from him." And she said, "He will not give me a get. Then you must remain married to him." It took her years to gather the courage to go to a civil court and get a divorce. But now she was expunged from that community, expelled from that community. I don't understand it, but there are so many levels of this, of being told. For most of us, people will say, pray on it, I know you'll work it out. Go to a counselor, you'll work it out. Not everything can be counseled. Not everything can be worked out. And one's physical well-being is, in my view, the greatest commandment. Love oneself. Loving oneself is loving God, and that is the first commandment. You shall love the Lord your God, and we are in the image of God, and we have been given free will by God. That doesn't mean we need to be treated like pond scum. People mischaracterize the scriptures and what it really means. So in most of my Jewish worlds, I know there are people to help, but there are so many levels and reasons why people will or won't come forward. And there are those who will encourage stay there, you're happy, you're well, it'll work out. And people don't always acknowledge the danger of that.
Thank you, Joy. And what's really interesting, even with the Black community, there was a time when there was great stigmatization on divorcees. And one of the ways we've always addressed it is let's pray on it. So even my auntie, and I wrote that in my book, I've seen my aunt get beat down by my uncle. And she just went back over and over again. And then finally she got the strength. And when she moved 3 states away to make sure he couldn't get to her.
Right.
You know, but it took her about 20 years before she got to that space.
Well, listen, and pray on it. There's nothing wrong with pray on it, but pray on it shouldn't mean
stay on it.
Stay there.
Yeah.
You know, pray on it and stay there and just keep praying on it.
I like that.
It's all going to go away. Pray on it ought to mean go within and look at yourself. Do you deserve this as a sovereign child of God? Do you deserve, wouldn't your God as your parent tell you, love yourself above all else? So pray on it is often said in a way that it doesn't accept responsibility. Pray on it is powerful, but it ought to mean really look within and pray like God would want you to pray. How can you be healthiest? And you can't help anyone if you can't help yourself. You can't contribute to your life, your family, and everyone you love if you yourself don't love yourself enough.
Exactly.
To protect yourself.
Exactly. So we have one more guest speaker that came in, and we just thank the Lord for Minister Bailey. She had choir rehearsal, and she was committed. She texted me late last night to let me know. But we want to thank God for Sister Bailey, Najiyyah Bailey, and she discovered her love for writing and teaching while studying at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Now that's where she received her bachelor's degree. She's a graduate of the New Brunswick Theological Seminary, where she received her certificate in theological studies in the areas of dance, leadership, and prayer. And the wonderful thing about this is her ministry has allowed her to go globally to teach the word through the arts. And we thank God for her being a woman that is married to her high school sweetheart. They have 2 beautiful children. She's the owner of the Butterfly East LLC. That's a company that offers graphic designs, business strategies, and digital solutions. Sister Nye, how you doing, dear? The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Minister Loretta. I'm excited to be here and an honor to be a part of this discussion. Thank you for inviting me. And what I've heard even just so far, I apologize for my lateness, but I had rehearsal this morning, and what I've heard even from Joy is remarkable. And one of the things that Joy said about the greatest commandment, and that's what I had, wanted to say, Jesus, when they asked him, what was the greatest commandment? He said to love God and then love your neighbor. So loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves is really key to this. Domestic violence is not okay. It's not okay in any situation. Whether it's between husband and wife, if it's parent and child, or it's just not okay. And so when we love one another, we have patience with one another, and husbands are encouraged to not treat their wives harshly in the word. That's what the scripture says. And husbands are encouraged to love their wives like Christ loved the church, and he died for the church. And so if he died for the church, a husband should be our protector and not the abuser. And so I have never had experience with domestic violence per se in my own relationships, but I have had friends and family members that have dealt with it. And in my experience and what I have viewed from the outside is when you want to be an advocate or a supporter of someone that is being abused, it can be easy to get frustrated and try to wash your hands of a person that continues to go back. When your loved one, your friend, your girlfriend, your cousin, your niece, your aunt, whoever, if they build up enough courage to confide in you about the abuse that they've been suffering, many of us will talk to them and say, you have to get out. Come on, let's do this. I've heard the pray on it situation, but many of us have said, you got to leave that. You got to get out of that situation. And when they do not do that right away, what do? We get frustrated. We don't want to hear it again. When they come crying again, we want to say, I told you so, and you should have. But when we do that, we isolate them. So then the next time they will not come to us. They will not confide in us. And that is exactly what the abuser wants, to isolate that individual. And so what I wanted to share tonight, this afternoon, was to have patience, to love someone enough to have the patience to deal with someone that is on the fence. I heard someone say it took somebody 20 years to leave. We have to have the patience to deal with that individual and love on them enough to be a listening ear, right? And we want them to feel safe. I have heard so many women that have been abused say, I stopped talking to my friends. I stopped talking to my family because they were tired of me. They called me stupid. They called me names. They just thought that and so they didn't feel comfortable going again. And so I encourage everyone to be that listening ear and to be open and to be a support by standing by their side through this. And so we pray, but then we have patience. And then we need to be prepared. I heard someone with resources to get them out. We should be able to give them solutions to help them get out of there. Opening up your home, right? And it takes a lot of work to do this, but if we love one another, this is something that we can do. We can save a life. I have went to school with young women that I was in high school, and right out of high school, a young lady in my community was killed because she had been isolated from her boyfriend, and her boyfriend ended up taking her life. My husband's niece she was pregnant and wanted to leave her boyfriend, and she was killed, and the baby died. This happened 2 months ago. And we have to be there for these people. We have to be there for these individuals. This is a matter of life and death situation. And so be prepared with resources. Open up your home. Open up your couch, even if you don't have an extra bedroom. Be prepared to have them stay with you. Be prepared to share the resources, the numerous resources. So we need to do our research. And I'm sure that it's been shared today on who we can call and what resources are available to help women that are trying to flee from these violent situations. And then have the power, to stand in the gap and be that strength for the person that is in a state of weakness. A lot of times we, look down on people. I can testify that as a very young woman, maybe when I was about 21, 22 years old, I didn't understand domestic violence. I'm like, how could you stay? I was very naive to that situation because I had never been in that place. But just because you have never been in someone's shoes doesn't mean that you can't sympathize with them. I'm an infertility awareness advocate. That's what I wrote my book about, my journey through infertility. And one of the things that I share in that book about those that have never suffered through infertility is you don't have to walk this journey to be able to sympathize with it. It's just like when someone loses a loved one, when you are grieving a loss, when someone is grieving a loss, just because you have never had that type of loss doesn't mean that you can't identify with what they are going through, and washing people, or washing your hands with people. Why are they grieving so bad? Why can't they get on with their life? No, let's just be patient with one another. No matter what an individual may be going through, we can have the power to say, I am here for you. and I am ready and willing to support you and hold your hand through this. I need you and you need me. We're all a part of God's body. Stand with me. I'm a singer. I like the songs. Agree with me. We're all a part of God's body. It is his will that every need be supplied. You are important to me. I need you to survive. We need one another to survive. And so we have to build up that community and be a listening ear and be a support. My issue may not be your issue. Your issue may not be my issue, but we have to have understanding to support one another. And one of the things that I think that, in my community, I'm traditionally Baptist, but I'm non-denominational. So, I know we definitely have the different ways in which we worship. But one of the things that the Bible talks about is spiritual gifts. And it's my prayer that we would even get a word of knowledge for those individuals that don't even have the courage to tell us what's happening. My prayer is that God, show me supernaturally who needs my help. Show me supernaturally who needs a text message, who needs a olive branch, who needs a phone call just to say, hi, I was just checking on you. How are you? How are you doing? So that the window can be open for them to just have the conversation. So many things happen over coffee, right? Having a cup of coffee. Invite someone. See a woman. The Lord may drop in your spirit that somebody needs support. And so conversations can happen when you just say, let's go out for coffee. When Jesus went to the woman at the well, he said, give me a drink. And through that encounter in John chapter 4 is where a life-changing experience happened. And so that's my prayer, is that God, show us who needs you. Give us your eyes so that we can see. Give us your heart so we can feel who needs us at this very hour.
And we got a little sermonette going on now. All right now, saints. Don't start me now. I'm ready to go in. We can close out here. We can start all over again. I'm ready. Yeah. Praise God. We thank you so much, Minister Bailey. You're just such a sweetheart. And we just want to thank all of you for being with us today. Just thank you. You've all have been a blessing, an absolute blessing. I want to recognize my baby. No, he don't look like me, and yeah, he in Scotland. That's besides the point. I'm telling you, he's my baby. Amen. Louis, who is our tech, and I share often, he just has my right hand. You know what? God will send you a ram in the bush. He's my ram. Here he's 7 hours away from me, and he had something else important to do today. But he told his boss he needs to help me. Now you know. So I just love you, Louis. Thank you so very much. Yeah, it's my Louis. That's my baby. That's my baby. That's right. That's my baby.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a real eye opener for me. It's really inspiring to hear about the stories about your lives and how the faith community does support people, which for me is the eye opener in itself. So thank you for sharing. It was lovely to be here. And Loretta, again, thank you so much for your love. I love you back.
Yeah. He's always read when I talk, so watch.
Always.
Listen, I tell people, I'm going to tell you I love you now. You ain't got to worry when I leave the pen about how I felt about you. I'm letting you know now. Love you. So we want to thank especially our board of trustee member, Dr. Christine Thorpe of Women of Concern Professionals Strategic Conscious Networking. We started this at the early part of the year, putting our programs together. And she was very instrumental in directing and helping us. So we thank you so very much, Dr. Thorpe, for being a part of the organization and just putting your words and your time in. Very busy woman, and we thank her so very much. We want to thank all of you. I'm gonna be reaching back at you on a personal thank you as well. And once you're in my world, you just never get out. I just want to let you know, and y'all know that because y'all know me from somewhere before. You ain't getting out because that's how I flow. You don't get out. Sorry, you ain't going nowhere. So we just want to praise and thank God for that and for the candidness of this conversation. Now, what I took from this is we all know that we have work to do, and we kind of get the step to the next step. I want to make sure that everybody has their information listed. When you go to WOCPSENs.com, on the page of the conference, each picture will send you to to a website that you have, or either to LinkedIn. Let's keep this conversation going. We can make a change. I'm one of those people that I dig in. No, I can't change the world, but I can change my backyard. I can pull the weeds from my backyard and plant flowers. And if we all pull the weeds and plant some flowers, we will have a better world. And that's what it's about. The reason why we don't get along is we're scared to talk to each other. Well, I ain't scared. The red in my veins, this ain't Kool-Aid. I ain't scared. Let's talk about it. So let's give everybody last words and comments before we close out, because we want to make sure we're done at 2 o'clock as promised. Any last words or comments? Dr. Thorpe, would you start with the last words or comments, please?
Sure. First and foremost, this has truly been a blessing. Very, very much honored and just delighted to share the platform with each and every one of you. You've given such rich insight, inspiration, and guidance on this very important topic. As we embrace those who are in abuse situations, as Minister Bailey has mentioned, we also need to talk through the education intervention side in dealing with abusers, those who are abusing those around them. We need to have systems in place there, because whether they're aware or not, and Reverend Mitchell, you made some really interesting points in your conversation, is to really understand what we're doing and why we're doing it to the extent that we can. And those of us who are on the ground in ministry, in other services, to be able to really fine tune and see what is happening out there and be able to support in real time, truly close and personal, because in whatever situation of interpersonal violence there is out there, we need to get really close and play a role in supporting people, because it's hard, it's hurtful, and it's a ripple effect that affects many lives, and some for generations.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. John?
Yes, what I certainly learned during these two very abundantly interesting 2 hours is that regardless of our spiritual background, that in order for us to minister to the survivors of intimate partner abuse, we have to really see it as a process. It is no one portal, no one approach. And granted, we have to bring in the spiritual. But what I heard consistently said today is we have to help the survivor first love themselves. Because unless they can be convinced, I'm lovable, we could talk to her blue in the face about the love of God and our love for them, and perhaps somebody in their family who really loves them. But then it's not going to penetrate to the point that they can help themselves. And so it's a process. And the more we're open to the different facets, I think the more we can minister to them.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Reverend Rita, your last words?
I think what it brought back to mind and really resonated with Reverend Mitchell. And that is, and as we're speaking, what comes to my mind is, and as well as with John, with the LBGT community. And how do we break that cycle? You know, Jesus died for all. And so the thing that always come to mind is to get to the abuser. And if we can get to the abuser, to why that person is abusive, and to have the abuser become an advocate and a spokesperson to look at that side of it. That for me is where my mind is right now. So that has stimulated a lot of thinking, and really quickly, I have a ministry that I started in Getty Issues Ministry, because Gideon didn't understand the Torah. He didn't understand what they was, you know, I hear all the stories what God did for the children, but he's not there with me right now. And really in the process of starting a grief camp for children, childhood children would have been traumatized regardless of whether it's domestic violence or otherwise, but also to target the entire family. So that just kind of confirmed for me that I am on the right track as to what I am trying to implement here in Jacksonville, Florida.
Wonderful. I'm glad that we were able to confirm. Look at God confirming your work.
Yes.
Reverend Damon, your last words, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to comment on something. I didn't get a chance to jump in on the previous conversation, so I'm going to say that very quickly. Just wanted to say that, you know, part of the issue with this whole thing in the church, I think, centers around theology, around these issues of reconciliation, issues around forgiveness, and the sanctity of marriage. And I want us to really think about what that means, because many times I think in the church we try to be so inclusive that we forget that in God does indeed take sides. And if we look at the Bible, we'll see that that side is always primarily on the side of those who have been oppressed. And that does not mean there is no love or any concern for those who are perpetrators, but the urgency comes around when we're looking at the needs of those who are oppressed and victims of violence. And so we have to take that perspective and think about that theologically when we're actually looking at these issues. Having said that, I want to say I really enjoyed this discussion. It was great to hear all the perspectives. Really opened up some other things for me to think about as well. And really just enjoyed being here. And I concur with everything that has been said. God bless you and be well.
Thank you so much. Reverend Bridget, you took us some places that way beyond the sky.
Well, I know for me, the end of the journey, while Damon was talking about reconciliation, I forgave both my parents way later. My father just passed away 5 years ago, and my sister and I were able to make sure the ending of his life was so much better than the beginning of his life. But that was a personal choice. I tell people all the time, you don't have to be like me. That was for me and nobody else, you know, to forgive him and to make sure he was well taken care of. My mom is still living. She's a pistol, and she just tickles me, you know, to pieces, but I'm glad we all survived. And there is a way to survive. It may take some time to get there, but there is a way to survive. And even in my father's brokenness, I understood that he came from a place of brokenness himself from his childhood. So when we look at generational curses, sometimes we have to go back and find out and figure out, why does this continue to happen? I have two lovely adult daughters who are doing well, and thank God their mom's toxicity in the early years have not, I kind of cleaned up myself before I started raising my girls. And so they are healthy, they are happy, and they know they always have a place with as far as coming to me to say, hey, I'm hurting. And not thank you, Minister Bailey, for saying that, because I think sometimes people sympathize, but they don't know how to empathize. I know how to empathize now instead of just showing sympathy. Empathizing means you get down in there with them and you stay there as long as they need you. And so that's what I am learning how to do a lot more effectively than to just say, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know how you feel, and then go on about my business. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Joy, your last comments.
All right. It has been an outstanding experience. I'm so pleased to have heard every one of you, to have been moved by your comments, and you've all made me think a lot more on this topic. And I think as I've listened to each of you speak, I have asked myself, what is it within a person? And I totally agree with the comment that there was a time I would too thought, who would stay in such a relationship? I mean, come on, just get out, walk out the door. I don't understand. And I used to feel like, what is wrong with people? Just get up, get out. I read a recent book by Carole King. Carole King, who's a great writer for decades, wonderfully talented, strong woman, led this career. She did it all herself. And then went through a couple of marriages that failed for one reason or another, and then married a man who was abusive and stayed there, and just stayed there, and stayed there. And told herself, I have to leave, but he would say, oh, I'm sorry, and she would accept it. And when I read this, I was grateful that she shared the story, because ultimately he died of a drug overdose, and she had just gotten herself out. And her sharing that story, and she said she shared it as a message to women: get out, don't stay there, don't do what I did. But seeing someone that strong made me realize that, A, I don't have a right to judge anybody. You know, first and foremost, I don't know what's in the life of someone when I have not lived that thing. And as Najiyyah so beautifully said, even if I haven't lived it, I can still understand it. I can still empathize with it. But it also made me realize that perhaps there are things in every one of us that we deny, but they're there. And there was something in her that kept her there. Maybe it was the need to make it work. Maybe it was the fear of being a failure. Maybe it was the honest belief that I can fix it, which I think is in a lot of women. I can fix this. I can make this work. I can change this. But tragically, our organized religious communities have contributed and contribute to the low self-esteem of women, and our society as a whole does. And I think, and as we've discussed, this isn't just a woman's issue, but it is a big woman's issue. I think every one of us knows that we've stayed somewhere, a job, a boss, a friendship, a relationship. We've stayed somewhere where it wasn't healthy, and we knew it wasn't healthy, but we couldn't leave it. Maybe not for some time. Self-esteem, loving the self, we've all talked about that. That is at the heart of this. But also at the heart of this is the way we are taught as a society. Right now we're seeing women and everybody come forward and start to say, I won't stand for this anymore. But we're still standing for it, but we're starting to admit there needs to be a standard, a human standard, by which every one of us lives. I see this, it upsets me. Let me use that anger as a catalyst then to create a new way of being.
Thank you.
For myself and the world.
Thank you so much.
Empowering. Thank you, Loretta.
Thank you, dear. Reverend Rosie, unmic and give us last words.
Yes, this has been a pleasure and knowledgeable, this whole meeting. It just opened up a whole new world of how to approach domestic violence, and, you know, that we have resources out there that we can refer people. And one of the books that came to mind that I studied was The Skilled Helper by Gerard Egan. And it talked about how some family members, people who just really aren't skilled to counsel their loved ones or friends, and it causes more problems. So, you know, it just opened up something else that I could do in my church, is to bring in professionals to help those mothers, brothers, sisters, fathers, people who are experiencing this domestic violence, because they're going to want to counsel. They're going to want to not let everybody touch the situation. But if we can equip them and help them to understand how to refer or have those resources available, how to do a minimal professional way of counseling or training so that they don't make it more difficult for the individuals, and have more transparency, allow people to talk and express their feelings instead of telling them just pray about it, like one of the reverends said earlier. But I've just been truly blessed by the whole meeting, and I would like to make sure that I'm available for the next one. Thanks, everyone, for all of your knowledge and experience.
Thank you, Reverend Rosie. And Minister Nye, you got the last words?
Sure. This has been truly a blessing to be a part of, and I'm so glad that faith-based leaders, organizers are having conversations like this, because it's so important. We hear preaching, you know, whenever we go to church, whether you go on Sunday or Saturday or whatever, you participate in as a congregation. You know, we hear these things in big groups. But one of the things that my sister just said about small groups and having, you know, this sense of community, I think is important going forward. And one of the things that I had mentioned when I shared earlier, it's about having conversations. And so we have to build relationships so that it is revealed what needs to be healed. You know, and that happens with having conversations, taking the time, supporting our senior leaders who, you know, the senior leaders, our pastors and rabbis, like, they are leading the congregation. And so those of us that serve under them, those of us that are serving outside of the walls of our buildings, we really have to make sure that we are helping to take care of the congregation. Those that are in our, or even those that don't come to the congregation, but even starting there, those people that we see that are coming there, and be the church, like in the book of Acts that we read about, that early church taking care of the needs of everyone. Taking care of the needs is not just putting food on people's tables and putting clothes on people's backs, but we need to take care of one another's needs when you need deliverance, when you need to be removed from a situation, when you're, you know, in a crisis and you need help. And that starts with having conversations. We can learn from Jesus. That's what he did before he did anything. He talked to people. And so I think that will go a long way with the issue of domestic violence. When you have conversations with people, that is when things will be revealed, and we just need to be more intentional. We get so busy. We are so busy, right? And I think if anything, if we were taught anything during this COVID season, is to pause and stop and think and talk to people about what they have going on, and go outside of ourselves and what our situation may be and what we may be currently going through, and asking, you know, God for specific assignments every day. Who should I talk to today? Who needs my help? Who needs my assistance? And just get right in. And we can't save everybody, but everybody can save somebody.
Amen.
So
Amen.
let's just have that conversation.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So we want to thank everyone for being on our conversation today. On behalf of WOCPSCN, I'm Loretta Green-Williams. I'm the founding director of this mission, and we're on a mission to make social and economic change. Please go to our website, WOCPSCN, see the other initiatives that we have. More important is next Saturday will be our annual Walking in Silence for the Silence Domestic Violence Solidarity Walk. Now, the importance and the impact of that walk is the first Saturday in November is when I walked out of my domestic violence situation. And I had to leave early in the morning, grab my stuff, and get out. And what that taught me is that when it's time to go, a lot of times you're not ready to go, but you got to go. And so statistics show that most people leave a domestic violence situation early in the morning. 8 o'clock in the morning is because it is cold, it is dark. You need to feel what they are feeling, the anxiety that they may be feeling. And we walk in silence because what is the first thing that is taken from someone in that circumstance? Their voice. They can't be heard. So we walk in that silence. We encourage you to go to the page, our webpage on Walking in Silence, see what we have for you to direct you in. The wonderful thing about COVID, we have to be in small environments. Well, our organization in Walking in Silence for the Silence has always been small entities because everybody's community of domestic violence is different from the others. So why would you leave your community to come to my community to walk for my domestic violence when you have domestic violence in your community, right? So the walk is very small and intimate. We have a woman that is 92 years old. She walks 8 o'clock in the morning in her parking lot. That's how she encourages it. And Louis and I, we looked at, there are 24 time zones, which means the vision and the goal of this is that every time zone, we have somebody walking on behalf of somebody. Wear your purple, wear your lavender, carry a picture, walk for communities that are hurting, women of Afghanistan, the people of Haiti. Walk for somebody, but don't just not do something when there's something we all can do. Take those photos, post it on social media, let's blast it, and let's get people moving. We have to move the consciousness of our planet because folks have gotten stale. Please go to our website also. There are opportunities for donations. We have initiatives. We have membership. We are working hard at this. We have not stopped. We won't stop because I ain't going to let nobody stop. I'm just saying. So am I going to get back at you and beg? Yes, I beg well. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. It is 2:09 my time. We made it. Thank you, thank you, thank you once again. Be blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's great to be here. Thank you all. Wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.